to the fifth and for now final UMIO webinar in the series Moving Forward Together. My name is Damien Nunes, and today I'm going to talk about the future and how you can use speculation to find new or possible opportunities in the future, but also detect possible challenges on which you can preemptively act. Well, one of the methodologies that I'm really going to highlight during this webinar is so-called extreme scenarios. So I'm going to explain a little bit more what are extreme scenarios, why are they relevant, and also how could you use them. And I will give you also an example, practical example, how we apply them here at UMIO. So we're first going to focus on why are they relevant. Well, it has to do also a little bit like what is our perspective on the future. And there are basically two ways, well, this is one model to basically determine how you can look towards the future. So on one hand, you have the quantitative perspective, and on the other hand, you have the qualitative perspective. Well, what do we mean by a quantitative perspective? Well, thereby we mean basically that the sense that the future is predictable. So if I have all the data in the world, I would know what will happen. So then basically you have the belief that there's a thing called fate, because everything, it can be predetermined basically. It can already be analyzed if you have all the data available. On the other hand, you have a more qualitative perspective. And there you focus more on the sense of multiple possibilities, saying basically every interaction has the opportunity to change the course of our future. So even if we have all the data, if we know everything, then still every interaction has the possibility to alter the course of our future outlook. And that is very important to make that distinction, because there's a lot of investment in data science for also very complex environments. And the question is basically, well, will those systems, system basically give us the predictability that we need? Because we often are dealing with probabilities, and if you add up various probabilities, then in the end, the thing that is unthought of might actually happen. And that is what I want to think about the world that we live in and the extremes that actually occur in them. So I think this quote sums it up quite nicely. And in some cases, I think it's very important to focus on this. Well, it's better to be vaguely right than to be exactly wrong. And sometimes you see, well, the data shows this, the outcomes that the statistics, etc., the trends, every data showed that this should happen or this couldn't happen. And then still these black swan moments that occur nowadays still happen. So it sometimes gives us a false sense of security, and we need to be aware of that. So Eddie Obang, a very interesting speaker, you can find him also on YouTube, interesting TEDx talk that he had, and he talked about the world after midnight. And what does he mean by the world after midnight? Well, he basically said, well, mankind has a certain rate of learning. We learn more, we develop ourselves, but we also have a so-called rate of change, and that is the world that we live in, the rate of change. And he said about the moment that the rate of change is going to overtake the rate of learning, that will be the moment from where on the world is after midnight. It's a dark place, a lot of uncertainty, because we cannot learn as fast as the world is changing. And he says, well, this moment has already arrived for some, and in some sectors it might come soon, but this is a reality that we need to be aware of. So he said, well, we are moving from an age of reasoning towards an age of speculation. And we see that already in politics, that it's not always about the facts, the figures, the science, etc., but speculation can have a lot of impact on how we're going to shape our world. So moving away from age of reasoning, logic, to the age of speculation. And if these are the new rules, then we should better be aware of what these new rules are, in order to also make sure that we can take advantage of them. Yeah. So in order to think about the future, if we think about the world and how the world will change, we should also have a way of looking at the world. There are various ways of looking at the world, but I think which one is quite interesting is to see it as a system. So this is called systems theory. It's very broad. As you can go in depth on that for multiple weeks. But basically, well, to simplify it, is basically saying, well, the world is a complex system of systems. So systems on a micro level, meso level, and a macro level. So the world in itself, so for instance, the climate, or for instance, the global economy, is a global system, and there are actors in it, for instance, organizations or countries, and that is a system in itself. And you can break it down to organizations, to individuals, to even the biology within ourselves. Every cell is a system in itself, until on molecules basically, and go even further. So we have this system in system in system in system that's building on top of each other basically. So complex systems, we see that mankind has tried to cultivate these systems, try to control these systems, but also create their own kind of systems. And mankind has done that to favor its own existence, but also its own development and expansion. So by cultivating, it's also a little bit like hacking nature. We are using nature to our own advantage. We like to control it. We, for instance, agriculture, but also for different reasons, we try to control the environment, to cultivate and control the environment around us. And the things that we cannot control, then we create systems or environments that we, artificial systems basically, where we ourselves determine the game rules. So if you look at a system, it's one hand, it's an environment, it's a space. So for instance, for a global economy, it's the world, that's the environment on which the global economy takes place. And our economy, our global economy has certain rules. And within those rules, within that environment, playing those rules are actors. Those actors can be countries, it can be organizations, but it can also be systems that play an important role. If you, for instance, think about high frequency trading, there are also computers, etc., that very much influence the way our economy works. So in this environment, we have rules, we have actors, but there is also movement. So there's forces at play. Bigger economies, smaller economies, actors, etc. And all these things, they interact with each other, and things start to happen. Things start to evolve, revolutions, etc. All kinds of things happen on micro, meso, and macro level. But the world that we're living in is not only the world that we see. There are a lot of other things that play an important factor. So if you talk about environments, it's not only the world. There are also digital duplicates. There are also different kind of environments that are not physically able to actually touch or see, etc. But they do influence our world. So these digital environments, they have a very big impact on the world that we live in. And they also maybe have different rules. If you see how computers work, how computer programs, for instance, the biology of those kind of artificial systems, it's very different than nature. Also different kind of actors. And then we talk about transistors or processors and those kind of things, or an application. And they all work together to create this system. And they also have their own way of forces, right? They also have their own way that they can influence one and inner. So there's also interactions there, and it's on an exponential scale. So this all interact with each other, and you see that effects are basically as a result. See ripple effects, butterfly effects, linear trends, exponential, etc. And they all influence each other. And again, from there, the cycle goes again, and they influence, etc., etc., etc. So we live basically in a chaotic world. But if we look at out of our window, it doesn't always look like a chaotic world. If we look at our window, we still see our garden, we still see our street, and it looks all the same. But if you look at the servers on the servers that are running, they're constantly active. Our social networks, the economy, the climate, etc., everything is constantly moving. And when at certain moments things align, certain forces and interactions basically align and happen, then really certain bigger events can play a role that might even influence the environment, the rules, the actors, and the forces that are at play, which are not easy or maybe not even possible to predict. So we talk about events like political events, legal events, and new rules, or like the GDPR, for instance, environmental, economic, technological, social. And when a certain happening like Brexit, or like the GDPR, or like forest fires, or ISIS, or TikTok, for instance, I'm just calling out some things that have very much a big influence on our world. They not only influence where they actually come from. So, for instance, TikTok is a technology, but it has also a lot of impact, for instance, on our society or economic, etc. So, these systems are all connected, and a small thing on the other side of the world can have a big impact here, as that also relates back to the butterfly effect. And now we got COVID-19, or the coronavirus, and it's a biological happening that's now going on, basically, that we need to deal with. And it has a lot of impact on those various aspects that I already mentioned. So if I would ask you a year before, like, what if next year you would need to work from home, you would do grocery shopping with a protective mask, or you would not be able to buy toilet paper. And this has all occurred because of a virus generated on a wet market in China. You would say, well, that is just ridiculous. Where did you get this kind of fiction from? And that is the world that we live in. Like, there are a lot of now more of these, crazy, extreme happenings now that have tremendous impact on our world. And it was maybe not possible to predict when it would happen, but it was quite clear already when you now hear the specialists talking that it would happen. So it's not a question if it will happen, but when it will happen. So we cannot predict when, but we know that it would. So then we could already think about, okay, well, how can we be prepared for this situation? Our healthcare system, etc. What kind of rules should be in place? How can we already make sure that our citizens are coherent to the rules that are needed to deal with this, for instance? But that's the thing also with speculation. It has, on one hand, people can laugh, but people can think, well, it's not serious. But this is also a power, because if you can already speculate about things in the future, it's more light, right? It's more light. You can, you're not, if you're in a crisis situation, you not always can think as rational as you would if it's more open. So this kind of what if scenarios, what if, for instance, something would happen that would impact us on a global scale, you can create some kind of simulations, talk about, like, okay, how would this impact our market, but also our organization, etc. And it can be done in a more gamified way. So think about the future. Speculating about the future can be a lot of fun, and this lightness can really be of added value. So what is important to really remember when dealing with these kind of extreme scenarios, it's not about better predictions, right? So predictions are still very valuable, etc. But this kind of way of dealing with the future is more about better decision making. So you can do various scenarios, and from there also see, well, what would I do in scenario A and B, and is that totally different? Or might I do something similar in both scenarios? And from there, create a broader strategy that takes advantage or better deals with multiple future scenarios. So it's about better decision making. So a company that really focuses on this, Shell. So Shell is one of the pioneers in this, has invested heavily because, of course, with the whole energy transition, the relevance of Shell becomes something to really think about, right? Political, environmental, economic, social, technological, new rules and legislation, they can all impact the business of Shell. So it's in their best interest to really think about the future. And they also see, well, it's very hard, or maybe it's impossible to predict the future. So we better create a lot of scenarios to that they try to better understand the broadness of what the future might entail. But on the other side, also by doing so, also creating a certain competence within an organization to better deal with the future. So other companies that are dealing with that, so using this kind of speculation for strategizing purposes, but also for designing purposes, usual suspect like Google, SpaceX, Facebook, Apple, and Amazon. So they can strategize and design for a specific future, a specific scenario, but they also turn it around, that they try to see a possible future. They design basically their own future, and from there also invest or develop technology, develop propositions, etc., to make that future a reality, right? So you see that, for instance, with the iPhone, there was really a vision on how it would transform the world as we know, right? And then maybe not fully as it was predicted, but maybe even bigger than. So you need to also be agile with the developments that are going on. But I mean, it's besides these usual suspects, also governments, like for instance Dubai, think about what could or should be our city, not in general, but also like for specific scenarios, what it could or should be, creating different scenarios and also seeing like what are possibilities or challenges that you need to deal with. But also manufacturers, Lexus, for instance, has also invested in speculative design and various scenarios building. And it's quite interesting to see, for instance, their view on mobility, but also, for instance, how does, if we could, for instance, if we know more about our personal DNA, could we, for instance, automatically design a car that fits our personality by just using DNA sequencing, for instance? And it might be extreme scenarios, things that are quite out there, but it might be that those realities become true. And then you already thought about it and see how you could leverage it. Healthcare, for instance, is very relevant. And so what could or should be the role of our hospital? Not only preferred, but also seeing how things evolve there. Retail, IKEA, what is housing in the future in scenario A and B? And then also what's the role of IKEA to also provide to customers. So when creating these scenarios, the identification of signals is crucial. So this can be trends, occurrences, historic situations, system dynamics, expert speculation. There are a lot of signals that you can basically use to build a certain scenario. And it's very important that this is just a signal that could indicate where our future might be leading. It's not a prediction, but it's a force basically in the system, a trend that is observed and could lead to a very important moment in the future, but it's not sure. But therefore, it's also very important to have those signals very clear, and that you also see about make combinations of them, and from there also define various scenarios. So that is why they are relevant, right? So extreme scenarios are relevant because the world that we live in can be quite extreme and happenings can have major impact. So it's very important also that the things that we cannot predict, then maybe we should speculate about them. So what are extreme scenarios? Let's go a little bit deeper on this. Well, if you look at the future, you see on the left side, the now, on the right side, the future, the further you go into the future, the more there is uncertainty. And it also depends, of course, on the context that we're looking in. But we often focus more on what is probable. Right? We use predictions for that, statistics, etc. But we often don't look further than what's plausible and what's possible. And that also goes back to the more predict and control mindset of management. And sometimes we need to let go of that, because things that are possible or plausible could still influence us over time. And we need to now think about that if there might be an issue in the future. So from there, if you map certain trends out, you have those signals, and you can create these scenarios, and you can map them on probable, plausible, and possible. And from there, if you have a better understanding on the scope, on how the future could evolve, you could then also better track like how the reality is. If you only have a view on what is probable, and then reality moves to what you thought was plausible, but you didn't really move into that, then you're out of control. Basically, you're not sure how to react. It's crisis at that moment. So therefore, I think it's very important to widen the scope with regard to future thinking. So extreme scenarios basically only looks at at what is possible on the outskirts of the future funnel, basically, and this can really help to, for instance, look at a positive scenario, extreme positive scenario, and an extreme negative scenario, but also compare that, for instance, to a probable scenario, and also see, well, things that we do in scenario extreme A or extreme B, is that very different, or maybe there's some overlap there, and that's interesting also to further explore. So just to give an example of a very simple extreme scenario, so two extreme scenarios. One could be, for instance, for Shell, infinite energy. You could say, for instance, a nuclear efficient energy source has been invented, and it's just unlimited, and electricity basically is for free. Well, on the other side, an extreme negative maybe scenario would be, well, there's no unlimited energy available because almost or all reachable oil sources have been depleted. Two very different scenarios, might both be possible, and then within that, the future will probably unfold. So Shell, if you look at their website and if you look at their scenarios, there are a lot of scenarios that they create there, more short term, longer term, even going beyond 100 years. Extremes focus more on political shifts, others are more on technology, etc. And they use this really to create this sensitivity towards the future, but also this kind of agility towards the future, that the organization can also better change when there are certain changes going on, or occurrences or trends. So from there, we know what extreme scenarios are. Let's give you an example of how you actually could use them. So I'm going to give you also an example here at UMIO, just a very how you could actually apply them. So if we look now at the Netherlands, we have this national transition, right? We are moving towards a 1.5 meter society, slowly opening up our lockdown society, basically, and trying to get things back to normal, whatever the normal actually was. So already, I think that this hits, I think, almost every organization, and we have this very clearly on our as a focus now to make this transition happen. But if we look at the future of the coronavirus, there's still a lot of uncertainty. So you might have seen this graph here on the left side. Here you can see that, well, we maybe have now the big spike, and we're moving now down. But the expectations are that multiple outbreaks will happen, where there are moments of control, social distancing, etc., and where there's moments where it's going to be let down. So it might be, if we don't control this, if we don't control and contain this well, we might have another big outbreak. And if there's another big outbreak, we might go into a new and maybe even more severe lockdown. So at this moment, I think there's a lot of uncertainty, but it's important to think about, like, well, how long is this going to last, and what kind of impact does it have on our organization? Or what kind of measures could be taken in the future, and what is the impact of them on our organization? But also, what is the new normal? When we are going out of this, what kind of world will we be living in? Will it be the same as it was? Or maybe we have also evolved and transformed over time. So if you think about transitions and accepting realities, this model of Kübler-Ross is, I think, quite nice. Originally, it's more for grief, but you can also use it then also more for transitions like these kind of big occurrences like Corona, for instance. So it starts with a shock. Something happens, you are shocked. So some people then move into denial, like this cannot be happening. Or also, if I look at myself, also in the beginning, it's like, well, how big is this going to be? You heard a lot of people saying, well, it's similar like the flu, etc. But the more it went on, it was more awareness. And at a certain moment now, we actually have to accept the consequences of the coronavirus because the government has put the 1.5 meter society into reality, right? So a lot of organizations are now experimenting with new rules, already putting them in place, seeing what works or what doesn't, in order to make sure, like, to get the business as operational as possible. But if you think about those future scenarios beyond the 1.5 meter society, going back into a lockdown, or maybe it wasn't as bad as we think, we are still not. I see. Well, if I look at my surroundings, there's a lot of not really focusing on that. There's we are now focused on making this transition to this 1.5 meter society, but not looking further than 2 years, 5 years, for instance, and how that situation would look like. And this is very understandable because there's also a lot of uncertainty. But if you're able to already be aware of possible future scenarios, also accept them, then you can also from there use speculative design, use extreme scenarios to start experimenting and searching what works and what doesn't work, and potentially already integrating that. And I will give you an example how we did that here at UMIO. So, for instance, it's very important first to make those scenarios come alive. So if you, for instance, look at the website of Shell, they create a lot of videos, a lot of storyboards, a lot of stories, etc., to make the story as concrete and real as possible. That if somebody is reading or watching this story or this video, for instance, that they really emerge in this future, because that's very important. In order to really strategize or design, we should really first emerge in what this future could look like, what it actually means, this world. So a 1.5 meter society, while Corona was as anticipated, vaccines are becoming available December 2022, and we are transitioning to a new normal. You then also need to really define what is then a new normal. But then you could also say, well, extreme positive scenario might be is that December 2022, there's no COVID. So then we have New Year's and it's party, everybody's together, everything's positive. And it's because we are moving towards a global open society. Corona didn't survive the summer, so there are no outbreaks any longer. Could be, maybe. And all global citizens are vaccinated. So we're transitioning to a borderless world. We're already moving towards to a more connected world. But let's say a social and also political trend is that we're becoming really one world with open borders, etc. Might happen. So an extreme scenario on the other side is that, well, instead of COVID-19, COVID has evolved, severely evolved. Not only it's not only an issue for more elderly people, etc., but also everybody is at risk, and also the infection rate is quite higher, etc. So there's no treatment available, or not yet at this moment. So the only thing that we can do is that we need to transition to a lockdown world. So it's very important to just define a scenario, and it's very contradictory to another one. So the no COVID or global open society is totally the opposite, basically, of the lockdown society. You have the 1.5 meter society basically as a baseline in between. So you can enrich it even further. So then you have those scenarios here on the left side. You see, well, politic-wise, then, for instance, well, we see that the lockdown society, politics is extreme control. Where we have with the global open society is more about facilitation. Then the government stands back and also gives citizens and also organizations and businesses more space. Where in 1.5 meter society, there's more this fluctuating control depending on the occurrences, the happenings, etc., with regard to making the transition back to coming out of the corona pandemic. Well, maybe also with regard to the economy, rapid economic growth, because there's so much also optimism, so also on the social aspect, quite optimistic. Where with the lockdown society, there's a high economic uncertainty, extreme anxiety, where in a 1.5 meter society, there's a slow economic recovery with modest optimism. But this can also have its influence on technological developments or focuses, trends that are going on. So, for instance, in the lockdown society, we're not able to go out. we are confined to our own apartments, but we still have the need. We still have the need to go out, to get out of our apartments. So this, we could say about a technological trend is that we need digital escapism. So virtual reality, where you would now say it's a gimmick, it's not really becoming mainstream, and that is the way for us to escape our lockdown, basically, by creating by moving to these digital worlds. Well, for instance, with the global open society, well, we want to go out, but we want to improve. We want to add another layer to our physical world, basically. So then maybe more AR technology and physical augmentation is more important. Where, for instance, in one of media society, digital intelligence, there's a large emphasis on that. I'm not saying for instance, digital intelligence is not important in the global open society or lockdown society, but it's interesting to just speculate that there is a different focus, and then also see how that would impact your business, but also, for instance, your customers or society as a whole. But you can also look at the environment, and you can also look at, for instance, rules and regulation. Well, if you created these scenarios and everybody can understand them and you merge them and really see what it means, you can even create more storyboards around it or movies. Then you can move a step further and discuss the impact. So it's important to create a team within your organization, for instance, a marketeer, salesperson, operations, somebody from finance, for instance, and then really see about if this is the situation where we're moving towards, well, what is the impact on our market? What's the business impact it has on our unit, but also us as professionals? And you can do this then also. It can be very interesting and fun also workshops to do, to really speculate on what the future could be, and working on various scenarios is then also very important. Then you can share them and also learn from each other, and also find out what you would and wouldn't do. So if you look at UMIO, one of our USPs is that we believe that we bring to our participants and our students is engaging and collaborative working and learning. So collaborative and engaging working and learning in our projects, in our workshops, educational programs, etc. So it's very hands-on. But you see, for instance, the posted here, this way of working wouldn't work in all those scenarios. So for the global open society, no corona, no issue. We can do this business as usual. But in a one-off media society, lockdown society, well, in the lockdown society, we're not even able to come together. And in a one-off media society, well, then that little blue or yellow post-it can be a very important, it can be contaminated, for instance, it can be an issue then we would break rules basically at UMIO. And that's not something that we want to do, of course. But it doesn't mean, maybe the format wouldn't work, but it doesn't mean that there is no demand. Because I think topics like leadership, strategy, innovation, culture, finance and control, all these things, technology, they are all important, but the focus might be different. So there might be a different focus in scenario A or B, and also the demand or the awareness or latent needs might be different. So maybe we should create a different kind of marketing or awareness campaign. But also maybe the funds will be different, the available funds for these kind of projects or trainings and etc. So it's very interesting then to also see like how does it impact our customers on economically, but also maybe also on psychologically, for instance, and then also reflect, for instance, on your propositions as an organization. What should we deliver, but also how could we or should we deliver it, for instance. And this is just an example here at UMIO. So if you look at the formats, well, the physical sessions, traditional way of working, you can also say, well, what's the positive side? Well, it's a physical contact, this hands-on and engaging way of working. But what we also saw is that afterwards that is always needed to do this digitalization of work, and also the location is fixed, and also the date is fixed. So there are also opportunities basically to further improve this. So if you look at digital sessions, a new way of working, so yes, you have no physical contact, and you also know with digital work and your attention span is shorter, so you cannot have the same length of sessions, for instance. But your work is directly digitized, and your location can be flexible. So this is also a lot of added value when already working in a digital way. So then you can think about the blended sessions, and this is then really more referring to the 1.5 meter society. So you can have, well, physical, semi-physical contact. You can be in the same room, so that already has added value. Work is directly digitized. If everybody would work on the same laptop and maybe project it in a way, so making the format different, but the actual activities can still be fun and engaging. But also then the location can be flexible. Everybody can come to the same place, but it could also be like some of them could call in from a distance. So there are also new opportunities there. So we're already experimenting with digital way of working. We have to, basically, because at this moment our physical sessions are not possible. We are waiting for the moment that we can get the green light to do actually live sessions here at UMIO. But then we have to do it then with social distancing in mind. So we have to go to a blended way, basically, of working and on education. But at this moment, we already made that transition for a lot of our propositions. So, for instance, the hackathon that we did for MKB Limburg. So this is an organization that supports various SMEs here in the region. For them, we created a fully online and digital hackathon with more than 100 students working on challenges for companies here in the region. So, for instance, thinking about tourism in a 1.5 meter society, or events, how would we do that, for instance? But also, for instance, looking at retail and how would a store then actually look like? Not only, the 1.5 meter, but also thinking about, for instance, how you can use digital technology, for instance, to also make sure you are able to deliver the same, but maybe even more value than you did before. So if you map those scenarios towards those formats, so you have no COVID, COVID-19, COVID-20 on the left side, and on the physical session blended and the digital, you see that, well, in the global open society, both physical blended and digital sessions are possible. Well, you could say, well, we would only do physical sessions, but, well, we also have clients on the other side of the world, in South Africa, for instance, in the Suriname, in China, etc. So we could also provide extra value by also providing blended sessions, for instance, or maybe we could do something digitally, etc. So it doesn't necessarily mean that we need to move back fully to the physical sessions. So in a 1.5 meter society, well, we can do blended, but we can still do digital. And in the lockdown society, yes, then it's only digital. So we don't know, we're not sure how the corona pandemic will evolve the next months, years, etc. But if we have to go back to lockdown, we're not out of business. We're still able to provide the value. We're still able to care for our customers, basically, our clients. So speculative design is all about then the fringes, basically, on what is possible and bringing that back also to reality. So you can use it then if you speculate about the future, like, okay, what kind of future could be, but also do we want to have, and then see, well, what kind of strategy should we build, but also how should our business evolve, or how our products or our services, but also our systems, how are the way we work together with our partners in the network, for instance. Right, so it's about ambition, like what kind of future would you like to have, but it's also crisis management and dealing better with going through uncertain times. But in the end, maybe even more important is that by doing this more often, you generate a certain competence to deal with this kind of uncertainty, but also in the end, also a certain culture change. That it's not only about predict and control, but you also as an organization are able to think more about in an agile way. Not only doing it, but also thinking it is quite important. So what can UMIO offer? Well, I think it's very important when you create these scenarios, it's important to sometimes also get in an external perspective. And like I said, these systems, the world that we live in, has various powers, various dimensions that play an important role. So within the University of Maastricht, we have various faculties filled with relevant domain knowledge that we can bring to the table, which is quite relevant for scenario building, but also, for instance, for developing interventions. Furthermore, we have, of course, a lot of young, ambitious students with fresh perspectives. So these creative minds is something that can also help when actually designing these strategies and those news propositions, etc. Furthermore, we have a global network. So on one hand, we have, of course, we are connected with a lot of interesting stakeholders here in the region, province, municipalities, etc., other knowledge institutions. But also, of course, on a global scale, there are a lot of interesting institutions and organizations and partners that we can connect also to this for knowledge, but also for different other purposes. In the end, well, you can bring all the knowledge to the table, all the people, etc. But in the end, it's also the process that you go through and the tools that you use. So this kind of energetic facilitation, this is really part of the UMIO DNA. So we have a lot of experience with various design thinking, speculative design techniques. It's a strategy that we can bring to the table, and we are able to facilitate in a very energetic, fun and way to making sure that on an efficient and effective way we creating these scenarios and designing future strategies and propositions. And furthermore, I think it's also very important that we show also our determination. Well, we have the really ambition to provide added value to our environment. So by, for instance, education, but also the projects and the workshops that we do. So we really want to open our doors to the world, to our partners, to our clients, former, but also new clients, to also see like we are here to help you through this crisis. And I think this kind of speculative thinking is a way that can be a value addition to already the activities that you are embark on. Well, with that, I want to move to the end of this webinar and really also reflect on yourself. Well, maybe the new normal, well, everybody now works already digitally. We come to the conclusion maybe, well, we can work any place, anytime, any format with anyone. Well, if that would be the future situation, would you then still live where you live right now? Would you maybe move? Would you? How would that be also for sourcing people around the world? Maybe not only locally, but now you can really have access to people on the other side of the world. So this kind of changes can have a lot of impact. Think about those kind of things. But also, we've seen the impact that the iPhone has on how we communicate with each other, how we work, for instance. So augmented reality is moving further and further and further, and we are heading more and more closer towards an interface that might create the same revolution that the iPhone did in the past. So it might be, so this is also speculating, but these kind of events, these kind of developments can have a major impact on how the world would look like. Not only for fun, but also really for business, can have societal impact, etc. So it's good to think about these things and to really speculate what the impact is on you and your organization. Well, for now, this is it. I hope that I inspired you a bit, and of course, I want to further engage in your future thinking. Also, if there are things that are relevant, if you want to talk with me, discuss, and maybe we can help your organization, feel free to contact me via one of these channels that I mentioned here. And I think also when it comes to the future, the best way to predict the future is to actually design it. Yes, there are forces at play that influence us, but there also is room where we can also form the future to our own liking. Well, with that, I want to thank you for your attention and have a nice day.